Good morning, Scotland. Good morning, social media land. I hope you are well. It is Wednesday, the 20th of November, 2024. How long will we allow the lies of the Union to persist? How long will we accept the myth that Scotland willingly entered into a partnership of equals, when the truth is that the Treaty of Union was a forced agreement born of coercion, betrayal, and exploitation? Scotland did not unite with England. Scotland was subjugated. The events leading to the Treaty of the Union expose the raw injustice of how Scotland's sovereignty was stolen. At the turn of the 18th century, Scotland was a nation in crisis. The Darien Scheme, a bold but doomed attempt to establish a Scottish colony in Panama, drained nearly a quarter of the nation's wealth. Thousands of Scots invested their savings, only to see their hopes crushed by disease, starvation, and a hostile Spanish force. Yet this tragedy wasn't a failure of planning, it was sabotaged by England. The East India Company lobbied to block the scheme, and King William III, serving as monarch of both England and Scotland, prohibited English colonies from aiding the Scots. The Navigation Acts classified Scotland as a foreign nation, cutting it off from critical trade routes. England's indifference, or deliberate interference, left Scotland isolated and ruined. In the aftermath, famine swept the land and Scotland teetered on the brink of economic collapse. England seized the opportunity to exploit Scotland's desperation. The Alien Act of 1705 threatened to bar Scottish exports to England and classify Scots as aliens. This was economic blackmail, plain and simple. England made it clear, agree to the Union or face complete and utter economic ruin. Negotiations for the treaty were a sham. Scottish nobles, many of whom were financially devastated by Darien, were bribed with pensions, cash and titles. These men betrayed their nation, selling out Scotland's sovereignty for personal gain. Meanwhile, ordinary Scots rioted in the streets, furious at this betrayal, but their voices were ignored. England's military posture during this time underscored the imbalance. Troops were stationed along the border, naval forces anchored ominously in the Firth of Forth. This was not a partnership, it was a takeover under the threat of force. The Treaty of the Union codified Scotland's subjugation. Scotland's military forces were absorbed into the British Army, effectively disarming the nation. English troops began constructing roads and forts across the Highlands, not to protect Scotland, but to dominate it. General George Wade and his successor, Major William Caulfield, oversaw the creation of thousands of miles of military roads and numerous forts, turning the Highlands into a militarised zone. These measures weren't designed to unify, they were designed to suppress. The military infrastructure built during this time paved the way for one of Scotland's darkest chapters, the Highland clearances. Using the very roads and forts established to control them, English troops forcibly removed Highland communities, displacing thousands to make way for sheep farming and land consolidation. This was not collateral damage. This was a deliberate extension of England's exploitation of Scotland's people and land. The betrayal didn't stop there. The same Scottish nobles who supported the Union profited from the clearances, leasing their lands to English landlords or converting them to agriculture. They turned their backs on their own people, aligning themselves with English power and privilege. The Treaty of the Union was not a noble partnership, it was a calculated conquest. Scotland was militarily occupied, economically blackmailed, and politically manipulated. The roads, forts and clearances are a lasting reminder of a system designed to exploit Scotland for England's benefit. Even today, The scars of this history remain and the narrative of partnership persists. But the truth is undeniable. Scotland deserves better than a union built on betrayal. It's time to confront the reality of our history and recognise that the union was never about equality. It was always about domination. How can any Scot look at this history and still defend a union that began with such betrayal and continues to exploit us to this very day? Scotland's future will never be secure until we reclaim our sovereignty and build a nation that serves its people and not the interests of another country. Our history is not taught in our schools. Have you ever wondered why that is? How many of you watching this knew that story? Were you taught this at school? I don't think you were. I certainly wasn't. I only began researching all of this properly a couple of years ago, and I still didn't know about the military roads that connected all different forts across the Highlands. It was only through somebody else's video on TikTok that I learned about it, and then researched it, and then was blown away. It's harrowing to think that this exploitation, in just a different form, continues today. You know, we talked about the Macron report, the hiding of Scotland's wealth. We talked about the austerity yesterday and our finances being linked to how England decides how it behaves towards its own people. And now being constructed off the east coast of Scotland are 4 gigantic cables that will go under the sea, taking all of our renewable energy and landing it somewhere down south. They're doing it again. The exploitation is ridiculous. The fact that we're going to lose Grangemouth. Scotland has, 97% of the oil and the gas on these islands, and they're going to be closing our only refinery. That's making us reliant on English infrastructure, or worse still, that gets shipped overseas, processed and then sold back to us at inflated prices. How can you accept this? How can anybody accept this? There's a blog attached to this video as well, and you can get that at saorsascot.com/blog. I recommend you read it, I recommend you share it, I recommend you share this video. The history of our nation is riddled with blood and exploitation. I think it's about time that the unionists of this land got a backbone and accepted this. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow with another video. Until then, have a tremendous day.
I can't get no sleep.